Welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Heart and Soul. This is episode 6. Suicune. Mason is making the slow walk from the sandy beach down the coast to Snowy Island City, not island. Suddenly, a heavy mist rolls in. That's strange, Mason thinks. I've never seen a mist around the ocean. But I suppose they must happen a lot. Then he sees something standing on the edge of a cliff. It's a Pokemon. The Pokemon looks down at him and leaps from the cliff, landing on the sand. I've never seen that Pokemon before, Mason mutters. It looks pretty strong. Of course, that means that I really should try to catch it, he thinks to himself. With that idea in mind, Mason sends out Politoed. And the battle begins. The strange Pokemon easily dodges Politoed's double slaps and counters its water gun without even looking at them. Alright, then we'll just get it defenseless by putting it to sleep. Politoed, hypnosis, Mason calls. Politoed does its best to jump in front of the strange Pokemon and hypnotize it. And for its efforts, it gets buried in the sand by a headbutt. The water type then disappears. Politoed slowly pulls itself from the sand, looking disappointed. Dang it, says a voice. Who are you, Mason asks the stranger. He introduces himself as Suicune and says he's searching for the legendary Pokemon Suicune. What's a Suicune? Mason asks, having never heard of the Pokemon. Mason takes this moment to brag about what a great creature Suicune is. And as he talks about it, slowly Mason realizes that's what he saw. Mason announces it excitedly. He saw a legendary. He can't believe it. This, unfortunately, though, doesn't sit very well with the man who claims to have been hunting Suicune, as he wants the honor of defeating and catching Suicune and doesn't really like the idea of Suicune having a battle with anyone below him. Nor does he like how casually Mason talks about Suicune. Excited but casual. This all rubs him the wrong way, with him declaring he wants a battle with Mason. And Mason accepts, but before Mason can choose his Pokemon, Politoed steps up, apparently wanting to battle. And so, out comes a powerful Alakazam. This battle, unfortunately, is short, as Politoed's moves are Wake Up Slap, Water Gun, Hypnosis, and Perish Song. Which, well, Hypnosis and Perish Song, if properly used, can be really good moves. That's not a lot in Politoed's favor. And so, after a vicious psychic attack, Politoed loses, and Mason has to return his defeated water type. And thus having his sense of Justice restored, the strange man walks away. Mason finally reaches Sinwood Island, and of course he heads to the Pokemon to get some medicine for Ampy the Ampharos. He leaves and notices that Politoad's staring at the water, and it seems to be doing something. Mason calls Politoad, but Politoad ignores him. Instead, it seems to swing its fist towards the ocean. Okay, no big deal. I'll just return it, Mason thinks. But when the red beam of light reaches Politoad, Politoad jumps away from it. Politoad, Mason calls. But the Pokemon doesn't seem to care. Then the waves move and out comes another Pokemon. Mason recognizes this as Poliwrath. Politoad and Poliwrath have the same pre-evolution. This Pokemon is much bigger than his Politoad, and it starts swinging fists at Politoad. Mason stumbles forward, but then a hand lands on his shoulder, holding him back. "Is that your Politoad?" asks a strange man with a rather large gut. Yeah, Mason says. The Poliwrath lands a punch square in Politoad's mouth. Politoad rolls backwards, but gets back on its feet, and this time it starts swinging punches. Poliwrath simply takes them. That Poliwrath's gonna hurt Politoad, Mason says, trying to move forward, but once again, the stranger doesn't let go of his shoulder. He shakes its head. "Don't you know a train when you see it?" Mason hesitates for a moment, but looking closer, he notices, despite the fact that Politoad was sucker punched in the mouth, Politoad seems completely fine. "Your Politoad looks a little underdeveloped," says the older man. Mason thinks on this for a moment. Is Politoad underdeveloped? It's kind of weak, and its only point in battles is to ensure that the battle will only last 3 turns. He's never trusted it to actually win a battle. "It is underdeveloped, isn't it?" Mason mutters, wishing that he had noticed sooner. "Some training ought to do it some good," says the man. "But with that said, me and Poliwrath have some other business to attend to. So, unfortunately, Politoad's gonna lose its training buddy." "I see," says Mason. "Well then, I guess I'll just have to train with it instead," he says, a determination lighting. The man nods. "Alright, Poliwrath, it's time to go," he calls. His water fighting type nods and turns away from Politoad, walking to it, drawing its trainer. "Hey, what's your name?" Mason asks. "I'm Chuck. And once you're done with that training, if you want to see how well it's going, you should challenge the gym." Mason nods, knowing that he's probably going to be here for a few days while he arranges for a boat to take him back to Olivine City, so he might as well challenge the gym. And with that, it's the next week, and Mason is wandering up to the gym. He opens the doors and finds, waiting for him it seems, Chuck. "Chuck, what are you doing here?" Mason asks. And this is when he discovers that this man is in fact the gym leader. Chuck calls, "It will be a 2-on-2, so choose your first Pokemon." Then he sends out a Primeape while Mason sends out Politoed. Chuck frowns. "I thought that you were going to finally give it a chance. Using it in the first round isn't something that I was expecting." "Oh, don't worry. He's not going to stay here for long. I'm going to mostly use him in the second match. I simply need to get done this one little thing. Politoed, Perish Song." With that, Politoed sings, while dodging several punches from Primeape. You see, something that Mason has been taking advantage of without quite noticing is the fact that Politoed can jump nearly 5 times its own height, making it really annoying to try to hit. But once the Perish Song is done, Mason returns it and sends out, "Dang it, wake up, Teddiursa," he yells. This gives Primeape the chance to use Thrash. And then Teddiursa awakens, and the battle really begins, with it blocking another Thrash by using Slash. Then it falls asleep again, and then takes another Thrash, but this time Primeape falls due to Perish Song. And it falls asleep. Out comes Poliwrath. Well, Mason calls for his Pokemon to wake up. He does notice that rest has healed all of its wounds. But this is something that can be solved by a move called Dynamic Punch, which Poliwrath has no problem executing on the small Pokemon. And just like that, Mason's down to his last Pokemon. So he sends out Politoed. Mason makes note of this attack they used. It was able to take out Teddiursa in one hit. Of course, now Mason was contemplating the chances that Teddiursa was also underdeveloped. In fact, the only Pokemon that he's consistently used is his Flaffy. So maybe he really ought to work more on all of the others. He'll do that soon. But first, he needs to survive this battle as Chuck calls for another Dynamic Punch. Politoed manages to dodge a Mega Punch, and then dodge another Dynamic Punch. Politoed even throws a punch of its own, but it is quite literally just a punch and does nothing. But it does give Mason an idea. And so the next time Politoed uses Mega Punch, Mason hopes that Politoed can take it and tells Politoed to jump into the punch. Nodding, Politoed does. And as it's hit in the face, Mason calls for it to wrap its tongue around the fist. Politoed nods and is sent flying, but there's a long tongue connecting them. And once the tongue reaches its end, Politoed comes back at a much higher pace than before, like a rubber band. And Mason calls for a wake-up slap. Politoed nods and is able to perform this attack. Now, wake-up slap does not do much damage, but with how it happened, This will do the damage of a high roll critical hit wake up slap. And then, once again, it jumps off of Poliwrath, its tongue still wrapped around Poliwrath's fist. This time when it comes back, though, Chuck calls for Politoed to use Dynamic Punch. Mason realizes that there won't be any time to stop this, so he calls for Politoed to hit with whatever it has. Nodding, the Pokemon prepares a wake-up slap, but at the last moment, it closes its fist, and the two fists collide. This, of course, ends up leading to Politoed learning the very move that was just used against it. Dynamic Punch hits Dynamic Punch. However, due to the speed of Politoed's movements, Politoed's is a critical hit. Now, Poliwrath is also much higher level, so this doesn't lead to a lot of damage, it simply leads to the two moves cancelling out. And now, Mason will call for a water gun, telling Politoed to keep it up and use it to shoot itself as high above Poliwrath as possible, before once more calling for a Dynamic Punch. Chuck calls for this too, but this time, Mason tells Politoed to switch its tongue to the other fist. Nodding its understanding for what he's calling for, Politoed does just that, and only just manages to use the leverage its tongue provides to dodge the attack, landing its own critical Dynamic Punch on the head of Poliwrath. And this is enough to win the battle. Mason congratulates Politoed, well muttering it's got a really good replacement for Double Slap. They really ought to get it a better replacement for Water Gun. Politoed, on the other hand, is just happy that it survived that. Honestly. And not only did it survive, it actually won. This is the first time it's actually had a solid win. And with that, it is with a smile that Chuck presents him with the gym badge. And that's all we have for this episode. See y'all next time.